Good afternoon. I have pleasure once again in having one of my students talk about some various aspects of chronic fatigue syndrome. Dr. Patel is going to talk about vaccination, immunization, and chronic fatigue syndrome. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Patel.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nishita Patel from India, and I went to med school in Russia at the Tver State University Medical Center. My father is a doctor too, and it is through him that I was introduced to the world of medicine. I used to accompany him to the rural primary healthcare clinics in India and observe, thus developed a keen interest in primary care medicine. So did you know that close to 400,000 people died every year from the same epidemic? The same disease was instrumental in the fall of the Inca and the Aztec empires in the 16th century. So what was this epidemic? It was smallpox. And some centuries later, Edward Jenner created the first vaccine for smallpox in 1796. And finally, smallpox was eradicated about 2 centuries later when the WHO declared it so in 1980. Did you know that the word vaccine originated from the Latin word vacca, which means cow? Cowpox was vaccinia, and thus the word vaccination was born. With the eradication of smallpox, the conclusions of Jenner's experiments that when an organism is introduced into the body, the immune system of the body could recognize a pathogen and adapt to eliminate it from the body on subsequent exposures were in a way vindicated. Although there have been experiments with vaccines, we credit Jenner for the first. There are accounts in history about how kings used to inoculate prisoners who were then proved to be immune to smallpox. Jenner used material from cowpox pustules to elicit an immune response in the body which would protect against smallpox. It was this concept that eventually led to the use of vaccines as we know them today. The 20th century has seen the most advances being made in the field of vaccination and also the way we manage infectious diseases. It has also seen previously fatal diseases like smallpox being eradicated in the year 1980 and many others like polio which are underway. Vaccines have inevitably prevented disease, complications and deaths of millions of infants and children by protecting them against many deadly infectious diseases. So vaccines are broadly classified into 3 categories: live attenuated vaccines, inactivated vaccines, and subunit vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines are those which are based on live attenuated pathogens and contain weakened versions of the original pathogen. The advantage of this type of vaccine is that both a strong cellular and an antibody response is produced. The example of such a vaccine would be the BCG vaccine. Inactivated vaccines are vaccines based on killed or inactivated pathogens. The main advantage of these vaccines is safety, for example, hepatitis A vaccine. Subunit vaccines are vaccine agents that comprise of one or more components of a pathogen rather than the entire pathogen. They are composed of one or several recombinant peptides or proteins or polysaccharides normally present in the structure of the target pathogen. An example of a subunit vaccine would be meningococcal vaccine or the hepatitis B vaccine. The basic process with which vaccines are made is as follows. The first step includes the growth and harvesting of the pathogen itself or the generation of a recombinant protein derived from that pathogen. Recombinant proteins can be manufactured in cultures of bacterial cells or yeast. Viruses are grown in cultures which may be various cell types, such as cells from chicken embryos or cell lines that reproduce repeatedly. Bacterial pathogens are grown in using a growth medium. The second step is to isolate the antigen from the cells in which it was grown and isolate it from the material in which it was grown. Proteins and other parts of growth medium may still be present and must be removed in the next step, which is the purification of the antigen. The next step after the purification is the addition of an adjuvant, which is a material that non-specifically enhances immune response. Vaccines may also contain stabilizers to prolong shelf life or preservatives. The final step combines all components that make up the final vaccine and uniformly mixes them in a single vessel. The vaccine is then filled into vials or syringe packages sealed with sterile material and labeled for widespread distribution. So now there is a debate amongst the medical community on the benefits and harms of vaccination. It is important to note here that the prevalence of fatal diseases like liver cancer as a consequence of hepatitis B infection and cervical cancer as a consequence of human papillomavirus infection could be decreased by the use of vaccines against those diseases. Measles vaccination protects children against multiple complications like dysentery and bacterial pneumonia. The list of vaccine-preventable childhood diseases includes but is not limited to rotavirus, measles, polio, TB, yellow fever, pertussis, etc. The CDC estimates that influenza has resulted in between 9.2 million and 60.8 million illnesses, between 140,000 and 710,000 hospitalizations, and between 12,000 to 56,000 deaths annually since 2010. There are also the rare instances of adverse allergic reactions to vaccines. These are basically against certain components of vaccines like preservatives, which protect from excessive heat or freeze drying, such as sugar like sucrose, amino acids like glycine, and protein like gelatin, or materials like adjuvants, for example aluminum salts, which are added to enhance the immune response to vaccination. Also, the cell culture mediums used in the first step of vaccine production could be a potential allergen like eggs, which are used in the production of some influenza vaccines. The CDC recommends that for the year 2016 and 17 for people regarding egg allergies, that people with egg allergies can receive any licensed, recommended, age-appropriate influenza vaccine and no longer have to be monitored for 30 minutes after receiving the vaccine. However, people who have severe egg allergies should be vaccinated in a medical setting and be supervised by a healthcare provider who is able to recognize and manage severe allergic conditions. It has also issued guidelines as to who should get vaccinated, who should not, and who should talk to their doctor before getting vaccinated. So everyone aged 6 months and above should get the flu vaccine, but different shots are recommended for different age groups. For example, people younger than 65 years of age should not get the high-dose flu shot or the flu shot with adjuvant. And people who are younger than 18 years old or older than 64 years old should not get the intradermal flu shot. People who have severe allergic reactions to the vaccine or its components are advised not to take it. If you have an egg allergy, you should talk to the doctor about it so that appropriate measures can be taken. Also, if you are not feeling well on the inoculation day, you must inform the doctor about it before taking the shot. WHO has also given guidelines to healthcare providers that they should explain to the patients and parents the difference between a reaction to the vaccine and an adverse event like fainting or a breath-holding spell in a child, which can have other causes. This ensures that patients and or parents have received all the information that is needed to make an informed choice about vaccination. All this discussion brings us to the importance of being at optimum health at the time of being vaccinated. I would here like to discuss the case of a 19-year-old patient who was vaccinated as she wanted to visit a foreign country. She was not feeling well during the time she had taken the vaccines. Subsequently, she started experiencing headaches, exhaustion, and feet pain while she was on the trip. This example and the CDC guidelines stress the importance of being healthy at the time of being vaccinated. If a person opts to not take the flu shot, an alternative course of action would be medications like Tamiflu, which should be taken within 48 hours of infection. It can decrease symptom severity and shorten the illness by a couple of days. It can prevent illness in people who have had a close contact with a flu patient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. We actually have this very interesting discussion from Dr. Patel, and it should be emphasized that there are a certain group of patients who believe that immunization, inoculation, and vaccination can actually be a precursor to the onset of cases of CFS. However, this has not been well documented or proven. But we must mention that this is actually in the literature and has actually been discussed. Thank you very much, Dr.